Evening, everyone. So lovely to see so many of you here on such a nice evening. I know it's really difficult when the weather's nice to be stuck indoors, so thank you very much for coming. My name is Arvinda Gohil. I sit on the board of the Conduit here, and I have been curating a number of these events. Some of you know and have supported me previously, mainly around equity, women, and what it's like to be in the workplace, how we create spaces and places that support us as women of color. So today, as you know, we're talking about women of color in leadership. And I've got three amazing women here joining me. I'm not going to say this is this and this and this. They're going to introduce themselves, but I'm going to ask them a question first, and through that, they will introduce themselves. Okay? So the first question is, why did you choose to become a leader? Why don't you go first, Susannah?
Thank you, Arvinda. It's lovely to be here tonight, actually, with such a fantastic panel and host, so thank you very much for organising. I think in medicine, leadership is somewhat implied, so you embark upon a sort of training journey that will eventually take you to consultancy. I think importantly on that journey, and when you arrive at that place, it's how you use that role of leadership to permeate and create other opportunities in which you can have social impact. So for example, I became a consultant, a urological surgeon, approximately 3.5 years ago. And since then, myself and some of my newly appointed consultant colleagues set up the British Association of Black Surgeons. So I'm co-founder and trustee of that organisation. So it's really, to me, it's very important that although there's a sort of implied leadership position, that I really utilise that and maximise that platform to promote diversity and equity and equality.
Thank you. Jo?
Thank you. I have to remind everyone that I'm Scouse, if you have to tune into my accent so I can be understood. I didn't choose leadership, I think it chose me, to be fair. So it was an unusual situation in Liverpool, how I ended up Mayor of Liverpool, and that was from May 21 to 23. But I stood to be local councillor because there wasn't enough black people in our local council. I had no ambition to be a councillor. I'd had political opportunity when I was young, but I thought I can show other people that it can be done. And then, as I say, it was an unusual situation where the three nominees on the shortlist had been wiped off the shortlist, and so there wasn't really anybody stepping up to be the mayor of the city. And I was inspired by 19 black women in office in Texas. Helm office was taken up with 19 black women. I thought them American women just step up and get on with it. They don't go, well, I don't want to do it on those from the sidelines, which is what I've been doing for a long, long time. And that inspired me, and does inspire me to go, just go for it and just do it, even if you don't really want to. There's a sense of, I'm sorry, I'm probably loud enough. Oh, there I am, much louder.
Go for it, go for it.
My lovely dulcet Scouse tones, I hope you're all okay. But yeah, that reminds me that I need to go for things, even if I don't really want to. Them 19 women, I'm pretty sure they could have had a different choice, an easier life, but the whole office was taken off them, and what a difference that will make in Texas. So that inspired me.
And am I right in thinking that you were the first black woman mayor?
Directly elected, and I know it doesn't seem important to us, but when you're directly elected, the city gets to vote you in. So I'm the first black directly elected woman in Europe, we think.
I was just going to say that deserves a round of applause. Benaifer.
Hi everyone, can you hear me? So I'm Benaifer, I'm Chief Exec of Hopscotch Women's Centre, and I sit on a number of boards. And leadership is a really interesting question for me. The way we were raised around making social impact. That was always important in the family.
Thank you.
That's better.
Making a difference was always important. Our father was a very active Labour Party member, so one of my earliest memories is scuffed knuckles from putting leaflets through people's doors, and that's just what we did within the community and further. But leadership for girls like me in the 70s, that wasn't something that was spoken about or aspired to, and it took me a while to learn who I was, what my personality is, how my brain works, and took me to get to my 40s and 50s to realize my best place was in leadership. I don't actually have the skills to be something like a really good project manager. I could do it, but not well. But I could do a leadership role really well because my brain works that way. I have that ability to see a strategic view and narrow into the detail when necessary. I can't do the opposite. I would just end up deleting files or recycling causing chaos. And once I learned that, maybe it's a case. It could be argued. It could be a case that maybe my self-esteem wasn't good enough for me to say, yeah, this is who I am, this is what I need to be. I needed to justify it. Oh, my brain works this way, my personality is this way. I need this leadership position. I'll wait until that position comes along, and I probably won't take any other role because I won't do as good a job.
Thank you. So anybody wants to come in at any time, just indicate to me. Otherwise, I'll just keep asking these wonderful women loads of questions, which is an absolute pleasure for me. So the next one, what would you say has been your most important leadership lesson? Any one of you? Just the one, Joe.
Just one. So, the Michelle Obama quote, go high when they go low, that's really hard. And so years ago, I looked at transactional analysis and adult-to-adult conversation. You've got parent to child and adult to adult. So no matter what, what was thrown at me, from social media to in the chamber to anywhere else, I tried to answer back as an adult. You don't need pettiness from political leaders, whilst they're political leaders can be very petty. And some of the stuff that, grossly unfair, not about me, awful stuff that gets thrown at me. If I responded in the manner that it was given to me, I think I would undermine myself. So I learned how to go high, but it was more the transactional analysis learning that I will look at again because I'd learned that a long time ago, 20 years ago, and actually it come in really beneficial. How can I answer back as a fully grown adult, as an evolved human being, rather than the base instinct, which would be to go back. That's what.
Thank you. Who'd like to go next?
I think for me, an important leadership lesson, it's not been a single event, but perhaps a journey throughout training. I've come across a lot of leaders, some good, some absolutely dreadful. So for me, being a leader is as much about emulating the positive aspects of those who've come before me, right? But as much looking at those trainers who negatively impacted my training, who made me feel less than, who made me feel little, and reminding myself every day that I never want anyone I'm leading to feel that way. And so I work hard in my daily life in the NHS and in the extracurricular activities that I embark upon to make sure that that is the truth that I live by.
I think for me, the key word is empathy, and I've realized that the more spaces I'm in where I have more responsibility, I need to be more of an empathetic leader. And that's not always easy. I think it's kind of what you're both saying as well. And but it's necessary, it's needed, and it brings results. So that was my learning, because for me they were separate. Business was business, and being an empathetic communicator was what that was. And that moment when I realized, actually, that's the way we achieve goals, or was a turning point.
So do you think women lead differently to men?
Yes. Unfortunately, I think it's changing, but essentially yes.
And what is that difference? What does it feel like?
It's frustrating. It means there's a lot of work to do. It means I spend a lot of time delivering training, because it's my voice I want people to hear. It's my experiences I want people to hear. I think that on the flip side, there's a lot of pressure on men to be a certain way, to lead in a certain way, and changing that, it's a long, slow process. At Hopscotch, we're just about to embark on a positive masculinity workshop framework in schools as a preventative for domestic violence. But actually, that's it, isn't it? If we can get our boys and young men to feel positive about their masculinity, that's where that change in their attitude towards leadership will happen. It's very long and slow.
I think the whole area of emotional intelligence in leadership, I think that's really important, and women tend to be good at that, and it's not everyone. The women I've come across in political leadership, it tends to be braver, and that might be about managing things politically and not wanting to upset men. I mean, one thing you're bound to do in politics, you're going to upset people. It's not a job to go into if you're a people pleaser. But actually, some of the women that I've worked around politically tend to be braver. And so this perception that men are tougher and men make it, I don't think it's true. I think we've all got different skills, but I do think emotional intelligence is something that makes female leaders stand out. We can read someone's expression when they come in the room. Not everyone, of course, not every woman, but we tend to do that, or pick up different cues rather than what's being said.
I'd just like to add to that, to say that I agree with that, and along a similar vein, I think with that intersectionality of race and gender, with the assumptions that because you're a woman, you might be less capable, or because you're a black woman, the way you are, your character might be abrasive, rude, aggressive, whereas your counterparts may be applauded for being confident, assertive. I find a lot of women of colour in leadership positions, or on their journey to leadership positions, similarly overcompensate. And I know I've certainly fallen victim of that for those stereotypes.
That's quite a good point, isn't it? Because often women like us are called aggressive, domineering. So what's that all about, do you think?
Well, it's the stereotype, and I don't care. I'm not living my life by other people's standards on me. As a black woman, if I worried how society perceived me, I wouldn't get out of bed every morning. And I accept your point, and I think it's great. Yeah. And you do try and overcompensate. Like, I've sat down to tell someone off because I'm 6 foot tall and I'm a black woman, and they're going to say, "Oh, she roared at me," even if I use my smallest voice. But I suppose now I'm getting into my 50s, I'm going to express myself, and I'm going to, as I say, I express myself as an adult and as a fully grown human being. And if you think that's aggressive, then I'm going to leave you with that.
So I would just to chip in, I would just say I agree with that, and I think one of the greatest gifts that we can give to ourselves as women of colour is being authentic, and there's a certain peace that you gain from that. So I would agree, yeah.
And I think it's really important to recognise that it is slightly different for brown women than it is for black women. And I think that that's an additional piece of work we need to do as brown women, as allies in our workplace, be super aware of this and be very firm in this matter when we've got black colleagues, particularly when they're women.
Want to say a bit more about that? What do you mean?
Well, if you've got a diverse workforce, which we all should have, sometimes this stuff happens right under your nose, and it can be funny. It's supposed to be funny. I didn't mean it, but actually it needs to be called out, and there are ways of calling out. There are ways of being effective allies, and we all need to learn those skills and keep maintaining that learning as language and understanding changes.
Prompting some debate. I can see people hungry to say something.
Thanks. So my question relates to the next level of leadership. And so Benaifer, I know that you get yourself involved in appointment committees and stuff, so you have that sort of strategic influence. So I guess my question is, so Joanne, the first person of colour directly elected mayor across Europe, why is the next step for you not to be a government minister? Why have you not done that? And my question for you is, obviously I know within medicine there are people of colour who are really well represented across medicine, but why are there not those people running NHS trusts, actually running the infrastructure of NHS England? So you have a macro influence through the extraordinary work that you do every day, but in terms of that wider strategic influence, how do you cut through that glass ceiling?
Just hold that. I'm just going to take two more. Do you want to say something?
I did. I did. So I had two questions. One of those, when you're in board meetings or quite senior meetings, how do you differentiate that you're being marginalised because you're women of colour or you're just women? And do you notice the difference? And my second question related to that is, how do you make your voice heard when you know it's not being listened to?
Excellent question. Did you have your hand up?
Yes. It was just a question around the being an ally, and that's a word that's used quite often, but in terms of proactive allyship, it'd just be interesting to hear where you've experienced it and how that's impacted you, or where you've kind of influenced it, because I think that's really important as well.
Thank you. Joe, why don't you take why are you not a government minister? Or why are you not just our Prime Minister?
No, thank you. No, thank you.
Let's aim high.
Well, I wouldn't play the game, would I? So I didn't behave in a way that the party machine wants you to behave. I was happy to be a mayor, but I wouldn't be a leader. Your leader can be voted out by your other council members. The mayor can't be voted out because you've been. So I was happy to go for that because I am an authentic leader. I believe, at times I've had to be, situational leadership has had to take over. I can't just be myself because I've got a role that I need to play. But I can't see myself being a government minister because I won't do what is required of me in terms of playing the game. The other aspect is I've been written out of history by the men around me in terms of my role. So Eurovision, which I'm not a Eurovision fan or anything like that, it was the best, most amazing thing that happened to my city under my watch, and it was my decision. And the men around me have publicly thanked each other for the decision that I made. And, someone points out to me, this is how women get written out of history. Was it because I was a black woman? I don't think so. I think it was because I was a woman. And it is hard to tell sometimes. Sometimes the factor is race. Sometimes it's gender. More often than not, it's both gender and race. But I was written out of history. Now, I'm kicking up a fuss about it. But, half of me can't be bothered because while I'm not a government minister, I can do good work in the world. I'm like yourself, where I've grown up wanting to make a social impact and I've been brought up that way. I can do that without all the hassle of being a government minister and getting accused of things I'm not doing. But the real truth is, I wouldn't play the game at all.
I think that choice that we make of playing the game and not playing the game is a really interesting conversation. And when do you decide that it's worth playing the game? And when do you decide it's actually going to cost you? Really interesting conversations to have, So, either of you want to respond to?
Sure. So just on that point of playing the game, actually, I had an interesting little anecdote of when I was quite a junior trainee. And that we used to have these sort of paper forms you had to fill in, and they would form part of your portfolio that would feed into your end of year assessment. So do you progress? Do you eventually become that leader you want to be or not? And I remember walking toward a room and hearing a consultant and a registrar talking about how there were too many black kids in the school that their children were in, whilst I was the other side of the door. Now, what do you do? Do you fight that battle? Do you play the game at that point? It's these difficult decisions, or do you continue and choose a war at a later date? You know, which is what some of us choose to do, and I don't think anyone can be criticised for either. Sorry, just as that tangent, but to your question about boards, NHS England, and one of the things that I've paid attention to are the hospital boards across the country. There's a huge lack of diversity in hospital boards across the country. It's actually embarrassing. It's embarrassing, and it needs to change. How that changes, I don't know. There are pieces of work that organisations like BABS are doing with the Royal Colleges to examine and deconstruct that, and I hope that that will lead to some meaningful change. The other sort of issue that we've identified, and anecdotally I've identified through speaking to colleagues and peers, is that the process by which one becomes a board member seems to be shrouded in a cloud of secrecy. So that needs to be dismantled and made quite obvious, fair and equitable for a start, and I think that will be a good starting point for those sort of higher tier levels of NHS management.
Thanks, no. Playing the game. That was it, wasn't it? And so you touched on the fact that I sit on a lot of panels for things. That's because, so the deal is, you as a white person asking me to be on a panel have to acknowledge why you want me on the panel. As soon as you've named it, I'll do it. If you're not going to name it, I'll push until you do, or I'll step away. So, you know, for me, I'm still playing a game, but there's a level of truth that has to be acknowledged in the room. And most people are up for it, I have to say. But I want to speak about allyship. This is one of the hardest topics for me. I used to always say it's easy to be an ally, just do one act of allyship a day. It doesn't have to be a big thing, just every day, so it becomes part of your DNA. But actually, I've been hurt and I've stepped away from situations when allies who I thought were allies weren't allies in the moment when it counted. When all the chips were down and I was in the firing line, where were they? And so I now have to, I'm at a point of rethinking allyship. I don't understand it. So I'm trying to be curious, but it's hard to be curious when you're a person of colour, being curious about allyship. It's a strange position to be in.
And it's going to be one of the events I will curate at some point, specifically to talk about allyship, what it means for us, what it means to be a good ally, and so on. So I've got a question at the back, and then Mo, and then I'll come to, so yes. You'll have to just shout.
Yeah, sure. I mean, when you speak to someone, there are two things going on. One is who you are.
People can't hear you.
Yeah. Sure, thanks. When you're speaking to someone, there are two things going on. One is who you are, and one is who you think the person you're speaking to thinks you are. And that's going on all the time. Now, I'm speaking as a commercial court judge for 20 years. And what my question is, how proximate to whiteness do you have to become to be accepted? And now, by that I mean, do you change your appearance? Do you change the way you speak? Do you change the way you act in order to prevent being discriminated against, and also to give some kind of credibility to the person you're speaking to so they could feel you're acceptable to them? And this is all going on without anything being said. This is all happening inside your head. So I want to ask you, how proximate, because all the leaders you're dealing with are probably white, right? All the judges I'm dealing with are white.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, because there's so many people, we're going to have to just...
Sure. I think you got the point.
Yeah, I got the point. Assimilation is what we're talking about, really, I think. So we'll
I don't think
talk
it's
about
assimilation.
that.
I think you have to be yourself.
Yeah. So
It's not
let the
assimilation.
panel come back on that. Mo.
Thank you so much. It's along the theme of allyship. I want to thank all the men that were in the room for an event that was branded Black Women in Leadership. And a special shout out to Mika, who is the only white man in this room. Sorry, Mika, you had a heads up that I was going to do this. And I was at a Conduit event a few years ago called Being a Man, and the audience was 50% women. And it's just a comment. So I've seen, my sister's an incredible powerhouse and in the EDI world, and she has authentically, kind of intentionally leveraged, as a black woman, professional relationships with specific white men and really leveraged that to her advantage. And it was just what's the role, I think particularly if we're speaking about black women, we need to balance that with specifically white men, and people can come for me afterwards, but what's the role of white men in our leadership journeys? Because the boys who are being educated in school is great, but we've got a while for them to feed through.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I feel your stories and your pains and your disappointment. I was a corporate leader in the banking and financial services industry for 25 years, often made redundant when that came round. So I want to ask you, how do you self-lead yourself and heal yourself so that you can actually be a force for good and not having to play the games as a victim or as an aggressor?
Fantastic point. So shall we take those and then I'll come back? I know there were some more hands. Let me take those first, okay? Anything you want to comment on there?
So white men aren't the devil, are they? You know, in terms of, I've been supported by lots of white men. I've had some horrible things being said in a room where a white man responding would have an impact where if I said anything. So Michael Heseltine, everyone loves him for Liverpool. I think he's a horrid old goat. And I think the things he said to me, I remember 20 years ago saying to him, it was stupid of me to ask about a Labour policy, but I was asking about the Equality Act. And I said, do you think it's necessary in terms of equality? He looked me up and down and said, some African people are very presentable, but they don't know how to trade. So I was like, ah. And a white man just said, I'll take this for you. And I thought, thank you, thank you. That was allyship, that was stepping in. I could have said anything, but he wouldn't have listened to me. And in fact, whenever I speak to him, he looks round for translation from other people. And recently, and he said it twice now in front of me, it'd be a great idea if we recreated a slave ship in Liverpool. Just like my mind. And the last time he said it was a couple of months ago, and I kind of rocked back and forwards in the chair because I was so angry. But all that went through my mind, I know you're talking about things that go through your mind, he is not going to listen to me. I am wasting my breath. If I become angry, if I shout in the room, I'm labelled and stereotyped as a black woman kicking off, and this white guy from the Philharmonic Orchestra in Liverpool done the same thing. Let me take that, Joanne. Look, Michael, it would be, I don't think that's acceptable. And like Michael could listen. So I just think in terms of, we're not categorising everybody of a certain type in a certain way. There's white men who support me. Do they understand completely? Maybe not. Do they understand to some extent? We can all be allies, can't we, to whatever difference that we have. So I just think that I wanted to make that point on, how we treat each other or where we seek support or allyship. In terms of, I'm mixed race, so I am not just black. I wouldn't think of myself as white. There's lots of mixed race people in Liverpool. We call ourselves Liverpool-born blacks. But some things I behave like a white person, some things I behave like a black person. And I don't know whether it's my age. I've just stopped worrying about it. I have no control over people's reaction to me. Sometimes I can behave a certain way, they will see me whatever way they want to see me. So I have less concern about that. There was a third question, but I've forgotten.
There's something about assimilation that was brought up, and then there was the point about healing ourselves.
Yeah.
To be forced for good.
Play the bigger game and not the smaller game.
So my son was like, so what happens to you? Do you get a Liz Truss pension after you become mayor? And I'm like, no, I'm straight onto unemployment benefit if I don't work. In terms of what I've done for the last 2 years, it's great, but I am now in the wilderness. And, that's the other thing, and I think, I might be preempting a future question around asking black people to do work without offering them money to do it. I will get asked 5 times a day to do something for nothing. So I protect myself by saying no. and I just have to do that. And sometimes I can, withdraw and be a bit bitter and twisted, and then I'll have a word with myself and I'll step back up again. But I will withdraw and say no when I need to. I can't have my whole life fighting this campaign. I've got to have time out.
Thank you.
Benaifer, yeah, I'd like to talk about assimilation. If you've never had to assimilate, you have privilege. I don't care what your gender, your colour is. That's the truth. And I've taken decades to own my assimilation. I was born and brought up in Wembley. I wasn't born and brought up speaking like this. When I turned 16 and I left school, I left behind my Wembley accent, didn't I? Why would I take that with me into the workplace in the 1980s? How was that ever going to serve me? And I did feel bad about that for a long time, but now I don't. I've learnt to feel compassion for myself and actually think, you were so smart. You were thinking strategically at 16 and made that work for you.
Thank you.
So to your point about sort of protecting yourself, I think in terms of leadership, I think safeguarding yourself for positive impact. I've learned a lot from my peers, from meeting ladies like this, for example, from talking to people who share similar experiences, cultural backgrounds, from reading books about people who came before us, who've been through similar journeys. And as Joanne was saying, I think it's important also to separate yourself from work. You don't have to say yes to everything, even if your passion is aligning with your purpose, and it's a great opportunity. You have to think, am I safeguarding myself because I want to be doing this good work in 10 years, in 20 years' time?
Thank you. I think one of the things I learned very early on in my career is that actually you can get yourself burnt out very early. And to find that place and space where you protect yourself in order to continue that work is really critical. So we had some more hands here. There's 3. So yeah, do you want to go first? Oh, okay, that's fine. Whoever, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Jo, you have answered the question I was going to ask, which was about getting paid. But I think that I have an interesting perspective on privilege, which is about being able to afford to take jobs on boards. Because, let's be honest, if you haven't been to university and you're not earning a certain amount, you're probably not going to be able to afford to work on a board without being paid. I get asked to speak several times a month, and I very seldom even get offered my expenses. And I recently noticed that somebody else from a political party was being asked to speak at the same event and that they were getting paid. But I was asked to do a similar speaker slot and I wasn't being offered pay. And I think that we have to have a conversation as women of colour about the fact that we do turn up and do work, almost like we're grateful to be asked and included. And I think that there's something around allyship that we need to look at here.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you pass it? Thank you. And
Thank you so much. Thank you all for sharing your experiences. It's like, I'm sitting here with tears in my eyes because so much of what you said is really resonated. I want to ask a question about, in a way, it's about survival in a system that isn't built for us. But I also want to ask a question about, I see every person who's doing any kind of leadership in a position, in a world that doesn't set you up to lead or thrive as a gardener in a way, because we're planting seeds for a future. And I work with young people and we're always talking about this is the world as it is, but we also have to create spaces for dreaming, for hoping, otherwise we're just toiling for nothing. So I really want to ask you a hopeful question about what kind of seeds are you sowing? So what is practice that you've taken on? How are you swimming against the current? And what practice would you like to see from everyone in this room? If you could give one kernel that you would like us to sow in our gardens, what would that be? Thank you.
Thank you. We'll come back to that. There's somebody at the back and then up here in the front.
Hi. First of all, thank you so much for sharing your stories. It's been wonderful to hear it and so much empathy as well. Yes, sorry, I have a dog here that also has a lot to say about women's rights. Okay, so you mentioned, I know, sorry. Oh God, sorry everyone. So if we look around the room right now, we have a handful of men here, which extremely thankful for, and Mo, thank you for pointing it out as well. However, every time we look at women's talks or allyship or these sorts of events, it's mostly female-centric and it's mostly women showing up for women. And as you mentioned in your story, there's many a time where we can actually benefit from the opposite sex or others in position of privilege actually standing up for us and being the allies that we need them to be. So, long story short, how do you foresee us being able to create a world where we enable that a bit more, we encourage it a bit more, and we can create the space for that?
Thanks.
Yeah. Second part to my question is, have you ever felt like a checkbox? I've felt that way many a time, filling out job applications.
Felt like what?
A checkbox. I am female, I am not
Tick box.
white. So I often have felt that way applying to jobs, and I've been struggling with that quite a lot, so curious to hear your thoughts. Sorry, it was 2 questions.
Thank you. One more.
Hi. Really great experiences you've shared. So my question is, so I in my career, I think I've been kind of pulled up by white men as bosses, whereas dragged down by women for various reasons. However, in being pulled up by men, I've also felt a subtle patronization and, a bit of, you really need, you're great, you're brilliant at your job, but you need to soften your skills. And I'm like, yeah, right, okay. How do you choose which battles you need to pick and win? Because I struggle.
Thank you. I mean, obviously, there's quite a few there. So just pick 1 or 2 that you want to respond to, and let's hope we can cover them all between us.
Yeah. I think you've got to look yourself in the mirror at the end of the day, isn't it? It's what you can live with. That was one of my other leadership lessons. Like, I've got to be able to say, I'm happy with the choices that I've made. And, only you can choose which battles to pick. But, and what you said earlier around, when do you pick your fight, that I have absolute empathy for when you hear a racist remark. At parties, if something's got said, and I was like, I've been the equality and diversity and inclusion consultant for 30 years. If I'm at a party and someone says something iffy, I'm having a drink, I'm not interested. People are dead shocked by my reaction. It's like, I'm time out, I don't want to deal with that. So choosing your battles is an individual thing, but actually, I get what you're coming from. Something I wanted to say before, and I had to remember to work it out, the checkbox. Knowing when you check box. Look, people say in the recruitment process, because the black, disabled, gay women are getting all the jobs, aren't they? That's not what's going on in recruitment. But I do what you said before, keep asking the questions. So people will ask me on a panel, and I think they want to make the numbers up. They've got no black people. So I keep asking, why do you want me there? And if they can't answer it, I'm not going. And, the point that you made before, Diana, about being paid and other people being valued higher. If you continue to let that happen, you're not placing a value on yourself. So I say no to opportunities, even though it kills me. I will get great exposure. Yeah, I've got loads of exposure, thank you. It doesn't pay the bills, but you have to be strong with that one, because we have to value ourselves.
I wouldn't mind addressing the question about sowing the seed. So I think a lot of, as much as we are sort of addressing issues that are currently occurring, we have to try to, in whatever our leadership roles are, in some way future-proof it. So if you're on a board that is involved in processes or procedures, hiring people, for example, what are the processes? How do we make this fairer and more equitable so that in, say, 10 years' time, you may be long gone from that position, but the processes and regulations that you laid down during your tenure still hold firm? And so I think if we not only analyse the present, but sort of sub-analyse the future and try to future-proof our endeavours, then that's how we can best sow the seeds in whatever environment we're in.
And on the seeds, two things come to mind. One is mentoring. When we have an opportunity to support somebody, I suggest we do it. That's what I do. 11 o'clock Saturday and 11 o'clock Sunday, and anyone can call me, and I make space because I want all my positive and negative experiences to mean something. What's the second thing is policies. Whatever spaces you're in, make the policies work for you. Once you've got them in place, lean into them. Because then nobody can say anything. Then around that, you can be so creative in the way you raise up voices, because I'm sorry, I'm just following policy. Yeah. And I wanted to say something.
Which battles to pick?
Which battles to pick? So recently, I was chairing an AGM for a membership organisation. And I've done this before. I completely forgot that you not only propose and second, but you've got to make sure you've got a percentage of hands. I forgot the hands up bit. And I was reminded. And it's pretty obvious what where that demographic came from. And I said, thank you, we need to do this properly. So, I don't know, yeah, it looks about right, whatever. Where motions were passed, the formal bit ended, we sat down to have a meal. I sat down with this gentleman. I was really fine until then, until he said, have you heard, first of all, he's talking to me, have you heard of the Association of Chairs? I said, yes. He said, are you a member? I said, yes. He said, they do some very good training courses. I said, yes, I know, because, I've run them. He didn't hear that bit. He didn't hear that bit. But actually, I was triggered at that point. I could feel palpitations, my hands were sweating, I could, my fork was slipping. So I had to get up and leave because it was 8 o'clock at night. I was tired. I was not going to have that conversation. And a male ally stepped in for me and raised a glass to me and for all the boards that I chair and all the experiences I have. He felt he could do that in that moment. And that is a lovely example of allyship. I didn't ask him to do that. He chose to do that just so that I could go home in peace,
I'm dying to know who this person is who was so patronising.
Sorry, I just want to come in on that point as well. You're not a threat to white men in the workplace, so they can promote you and patronise you and do whatever because you're not really a threat to them. And so it's how you use it. When you talk about, when do I assimilate, when I do good, what can you do good in that position? How can you benefit? How can you benefit others from it? They're the choices I kind of look at when I'm being patronised and promoted.
I'm going to move on to something slightly different, which is about, I've been a leader for over 35 years, I would say. What is our role, what is your role in supporting emerging talent, particularly women of colour? Anybody want to take that?
So I think one of the things that I've found very rewarding that I've been doing for a few years now is mentoring, as Benaifer was saying, and I think making yourself available for the next generation coming through, for medical students, trainees. I've been doing that outside of work and also now with the British Association of Black Surgeons, and it's really important work. I think the trainees coming through and the young students coming through feel seen, they feel heard, they feel understood, and they perhaps open up in a way that they might not do with people who they do not culturally identify with. And it may seem like a sort of a small endeavour, but actually it can make a big difference to those individuals.
Yeah, do you know, I was quite surprised when you told me there was an association of black surgeons. Yes. I thought, how amazing! How amazing to have, enough surgeons who are black
Yes.
to have an association.
Yes, we're very proud of it. We're very proud of it. I'll be promoting it wildly after this.
So I think, mentoring, whatever you call it, I've collected a group of young black people, and a black person asks me a question, the next thing they get mentored, whether they ask for it or not, much to their worry at times. But I not only bring them in the room, I get them a seat at the table, and then I back off. Allyship is you're not the main character, you're the side character, and so I try to do that. And recently, an Irish black woman who I mentor in Liverpool, she is good at collecting very powerful women actually, but I took her into the room with Irish minister and somebody else, and she didn't say, I'm here as Joanne's mentor, which I loved. She was just like, this is who I am and this is what I'm about. And I thought, yeah, I was able to stand away, and I'm delighted that I've opened that door for you. So making sure you're opening doors, doing that sponsorship thing, talking about them goods while they're not in the room, just making sure that they've got opportunities. And, I was told this morning by somebody that they said, I tried to get in touch with you. I was going to ask you to speak at this event last year, but I got in touch with this other mayor's office, and they said, no, don't go for her, go for somebody else. That's a door closed for me, in terms of that opportunity. And she was all apologetic, this black woman. I was just new at the time, I didn't know, and I was like, that's okay. The other speaker's fine. But when you go, the doors that get closed behind your back that you're not aware of, that you have no idea about, I just take it upon myself to can I bring someone with me? And I try to pick younger people, men and women, and white women as well. And, one of the things that I found really surprising, I knew I would impact on black women, I knew I would impact on black people. Young white working class men said, I feel different about politics because you're there and I can relate to you. And I thought, wow, I didn't think I would impact young white men. And so I will mentor any young person, because if you can teach them to think of people as more equal as well, if you can show them or share their experiences, that all helps everyone.
Thank you.
And very quickly for me, it was actually Arvinda. Many years ago, we were interviewing, and the two finalists were a white woman and a black woman. And they really were pretty equal. There wasn't much in it. And Arvinda went, what are you thinking about here?
What is there to think about?
What is there to think about? And I was like, oh, yeah, you're right, and it's as simple as that. Sometimes it's as simple as that. You back the horse that needs the most push.
Did you raise your hand?
I did, but it was for the earlier ones. Is that okay? All right, great. So I have worked in corporate environments which have been toxic, as well as, for bosses who've been very kind. And the whole area of kind leadership is such an emerging one. I'm just really curious to know, what does it mean to you to be a kind leader?
Hold that.
Just a quick question from me. What would your advice be to those that are transitioning from middle management to senior leadership roles, especially of those probably Asian women like myself that have always been brought up to be respectful to leaders? You're always a nodding dog, you do as you say, but then obviously now transitioning into a leadership role, it would be great to know what your experience of that was like.
Thank you. Who wants to take one of those?
No, I'm glad you took it.
No, let Susannah go first.
I'm uncomfortable with the silence, that's why I jumped in first.
So to speak to your question about middle management, probably I'm not best versed in terms of managerial, but one thing I would say is sort of transitioning from what I know about my sort of middle tier training, if you like, to consultancy, is that once you start to realize your own self-worth, then you're in a different space entirely. And it's easier for you to transition and be respectful to those above you, if they are deserving of your respect, right? So it's that self-reflection and self-respect, I think, and realizing your self-worth that makes that journey slightly easier. And that's not an easy thing to accomplish either, I think.
I teach communication skills mainly to health professionals, and I have to remind myself, because actually if you use good body language, you can overcome that, and then you're at that next level of relationship without having to open your mouth, because it's so deeply embedded in us. It's pretty much impossible for me to overcome it in any other way. And the other question about kindness, yeah, kindness in the workplace.
How can you be a kind leader?
It just means you have to take a little longer in your leadering every day, because you have to make space. So I don't have quick meetings. I create the space for that person to step into as much as they want and for as long as they want. They know what deadlines are. But for me, that's kindness, is creating a space where they wouldn't have had that opportunity. And if as a leader you can do that, I don't know why you wouldn't. Yeah.
So,
what does your kindness look like?
So I am kind as a person, not always. Sometimes I'm horrible, but I am kind as a person. So I am an authentic leader. As I say, there's situations where I wouldn't be my natural self, but the majority of the time I will be myself to the detriment. And I suppose the cultural thing in Liverpool, we're quite straight talking, everyone's very direct. Not always, but we are. But I suppose what I talked about earlier about transactional analysis, I am not from a culture where I'm told to agree or that kind of thing. And actually, a lot of mixed race people from Liverpool were told they had a chip on the shoulder if they had an opinion. And so I'm from a generation where perhaps our parents were immigrants and kept their head down and done as they were told, and then we were mixed race and a bit feistier, and we'd answer back. And especially our schooling system in Liverpool, chip on the shoulder is what you got told if you expressed your thoughts in any way, shape or form. As I say, I am 50, I've got to a stage in my life where that's your problem if you think I've got a chip on my shoulder. If I've expressed myself as a grown adult, if I'm expressing myself in a way that you can't take, then it might be to my detriment, but I'm not going to change my opinion on it. So I'm not going to just do as I'm told if I disagree. Again, I wouldn't play the game with the party, won't do as I'm told. And it is to my detriment at times. I do pick my battles when I do it, but I'm not, I think, what world are we living in when you can't express your thoughts and opinion in an adult and grown way, and it costs you your job? And I have had, I remember I was talking to someone from the fire service, talking about the fire service before, years ago, it was 20 years ago, but the chief, I was told that you can't disagree with the chief, otherwise you get sacked. So I was a consultant, I'd gone on maternity leave, come back, I was the expert in the room, I disagreed with the chief, I never got a consultancy contract again. I didn't lose much sleep over it. I'm not going to have somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about when it comes to race equality tell me I'm thinking differently. But yeah, I might struggle that month financially. Sorry, there was another question.
There's a couple of other areas I want to explore, if that's okay. The one is about the pressure we feel in doing the right thing for others, particularly people of colour, and how do we balance that out with the kind of pressures of being successful and protecting ourselves. So that's one area I'd like to explore. I know you've got questions, so I'll come to you in a minute, but can we address that, do you think?
I've found it really important to have the right peers around me and my own friendship support group. So with the peers, I can really have those difficult conversations that get to the nub of what the issue is, and then try to find a solution. And with my friends, they know me, so they can call me out in a way my peers can't. So getting those two spaces right has taken a little time, but it's been invaluable in taking care of myself so that I can do more. Thank you.
I completely agree. I think having that support network around you and people who will give you that constructive criticism where others won't is really invaluable. I think in terms of feeling pressure to take on this work, personally, I've never felt pressure. Sometimes when you question why you're doing it, you have instances that remind you exactly why you're doing it. So I think I was telling someone a little bit earlier about an incident a couple of weeks ago where a patient comes into the room and sort of says, "Oh, you speak very well. I didn't expect you to look like that." Like, again, pick your battles, right? So I was like, "Oh, what do you mean?" "Well, you know," and the words came out of his mouth, "I expected you to be tall and blonde with blue eyes." And I said, "Right, are you happy for me to treat you?" Yes, and we got on with the consultation because it was the end of a long clinic and that wasn't a battle I was going to have that day. But
I read up on the waiting list, so you'd be waiting for 2 years if you needed to get
But you know, so that's the sort of safeguarding yourself, if you like. But in terms of feeling pressure, I don't think it's pressure, but certainly a duty. And those things and those incidences and those events do remind you of your duty and why you keep doing the work.
I feel uncomfortable around the word role model. One of the things when I had a child, and I thought to myself, this extra pressure that we place on our kids, they've got to be better, don't you ever get stopped by the police, all that kind of stuff. It dawned on me how negative our kinds of experiences of growing up are, having to be better and having to do better and always being better there. So trying to not push that on them, you can be yourself, you don't have to be the best at this or the best at that. That was kind of really a learning for me that felt very unfair. This is what we've been through growing up. In terms of role model, I feel really uncomfortable with that, but I am very conscious that I am a role model to others, whether I like it or not. So my behaviour is watched and looked at, and how I deal with things is taken on board by others. I had absolutely more friends than I could deal with as mayor. Everyone wanted to be my friend. I knew that these people, none of these people would be around. I knew that if I wanted to pick up the phone and speak to somebody afterwards, and it's interesting seeing those genuine people who want to still talk to me, who just didn't want to talk. But I knew all that. It did hurt though when I thought someone was my friend, and it turns out I was the friend because I was in that position. That really hurt. You just have to protect yourself. You can't go through life mistrusting everybody because of it. But actually, that really did sting in that moment. But the role model bit is, I do feel under pressure to be that because, I don't really want to be a role model to others. But I recognise that I am, and I must act accordingly.
There's a question here. Oh, a few more hands going. Okay. Spark something there.
Completely resonate with having that support thing, because I've got two of them sitting next to me, and it's so important. Like, sometimes I think I bore them to death, but you really need it, because with peers also you can't trust them that much, right? My question was slightly different. This was just a comment. So as a follow-up to the kind leadership, so there's something around kind leadership, so you give that extra time, etc. But how do you tackle kindness under pressure? So especially you, Joe, like you've got a really high pressure job, right? How do you manage that?
How does that corollary to that one? Because what we find, kind leadership, yes, but what happens when that's taken for, there's undue advantage taken of that kindness. It shouldn't be mistaken for weakness as a leader. And this is not by people or gender specific. It happens with peers. They think they can go that. How do you manage that?
So we've talked about your support systems, and I'm curious as to kind of how you build self-care into your routines. I hear a lot of giving out, death by 1,000 cuts. How do you look after yourself on a regular basis to ensure you look after number one, really?
Thank you. And there's one more.
Yeah. So this isn't related to anything that you've said most recently, at least. It's just a thing that's come to my mind just throughout this conversation. And that's around the topic of racializing our identities. So I'm just curious, in terms of the way that you each self-identify, and given the kind of historical context of how race even came up in the way it's constructed now, do do you each kind of identify yourselves as black, brown, etc., or do you identify yourself more based on your ethnic identity, like the specifics of the history and context of your own families? I'm just kind of curious about how does that internal conversation look like for each of you in your identity? Yeah, that's it.
Get the point. Thank you. Can you pass it to the back, please? Yeah.
Oh, hi. Earlier, there was a comment from up front about how she had experienced other women pushing her down frequently instead of pulling her up. And I wonder how often, I find that very disappointing and wonder how often you encounter that and if you have ideas about how we could improve on that.
Okay. We've got like 10 minutes, and I do want to finish with something substantial at the end, which is a kind of what does it look like further down the line. So please choose one of those questions each.
Okay, so
anyone.
I might take the self-care question. For me, self-care looks like spending time with friends and family, quality time, and I'd like to give a nod, if that's okay, to my brother Clement and my niece Renee, who are here today. So thank you very much for all your support over the years. And I think exercise for me is very important for my mental health. And it's the thing that is easy to drift off first. And I'm sort of trying to be kind to myself. Any form of movement counts, right? So if I decide to walk up the stairs at the tube, then that counts, okay? Or if I decide to go for a run, that counts. So whatever it is, just trying to build in movement, and it gives my brain a bit of space to think and digest things that I perhaps don't allow myself to do during a busy working day. And so for me, self-care is about movement and spending time with my clan.
So I'm values driven as a person, so my values define my behaviour. And so if a woman shafts me, I won't shaft her back, because actually I don't want to do that to other women, even though it hurts when it happens to me. So in terms of kindness, you know, I try to live out my values. If the Labour Party lived out their values as the Labour Party, we'd be in a much better place. That's all I can say. So I just think, well, all political parties, but I try to, and I'm annoyed at myself if I move away from that. You know, if I behave in a way that's not in accordance with my values, I'm sort of critical of myself.
And the kind leadership, I'd call that empathetic leadership. So I think any time we're being fake, we run a risk of people taking advantage, to use your terms. It just goes wrong. So as long as you're brutally honest, whatever your leadership style is, in my experience, it works. It just needs that honesty behind it.
Okay.
Well, if you're being brutally honest about being empathetic, you're not who you're going to harm. You're not going to harm anyone. You're saying this is how it is. What are you going to take advantage of? You know, you're going to come out badly in this, because I'm not going to change who I am and how I'm doing it. Does that make sense?
Okay. My auntie is here, and she's indicated she wants to say something. Do you think I should let her?
Yes! Yes! Respect for your auntie.
Your auntie?
For goodness sake. Just a quick question, really, following on from something you asked before. Having been a midwife, I was in the National Health Service for a very long time, retired for a while as well. Hardly ever saw any black surgeons, specialists. And you said you got the association. Just want to know how many members you got.
It's ever growing at the moment. I can't give you an exact figure. We're very much in our infancy, so we just had our inaugural conference a few months ago. But I'll hopefully be able to update you soon. We're still trying to trawl for membership and going through our sort of membership categories and things, so it's very much in its infancy. But it gives me so much hope and so much joy for what we can accomplish in the future. I'm very positive about it.
Yeah, it's such a great thing. Okay, I want to finish by asking each one of you, how do you think it's going to be in 50 years' time? Not 5 or 10, 50 years' time. I'm not going to be around, but I'd like to know that what we're doing now might actually...
I think it's going to be very different because we can only do as much as our baggage will allow us to do. Some days I'm so weighed down by that damn bag, I can't do very much. Whereas each generation is going to have less and less and less baggage, so they'll be able to do more. That's what helps me sleep at night.
The kids are so woke, I love it. So my son is really intolerant.
Can't hear
Sorry,
you.
where I was called having a chip on my shoulder, so he's the next generation down. He just takes no nonsense from anybody. He calls out toxic masculinity. He calls out lycism, with his friends. It dawned on him that he was getting a lot of work in his job, and he says, if I was my friend who's darker, he was like, I wouldn't have the same experience. So his knowledge, awareness is what he calls out, how he treats women, everything. I'm inspired by that, and I think that's why it's really important to give what you can to the younger generation, because they're not going to accept what we accept.
But presumably he's like that because you had something to do with it.
Yeah, I've got... It's only learned, isn't it? It's learned behaviour, hate, stereotyping, discrimination, all that is learned behaviour. So yeah, I've taught him, but he teaches others, and so, that's how it goes. I was taught by my mother too.
I'm very positive about the future, and I think, as Joe was saying, whilst we impart what we can on future generations in the hope that they continue that process, as well as doing the work to future-proof policies and processes, then I think the culmination of all of those things in 50 years' time will have a future looking a lot brighter than it does now.
And in your most reflective moment, when you look back at how it was to how it is, what do you say to yourself?
I don't want to be negative here, but I've had a presentation from Joseph Rowntree's foundation over the last 70 years, since the 70s, sorry. The numbers haven't changed. So I've been 30 years banging my head against the wall, little steps forward, little steps back. And, I am hopeful about the future, because you can only hope. But actually, the hard numbers are what matters to me now. So I'm involved in anything. People say to me, we want you to help us get black people on. How many black people are working there? What are the numbers? I'm going to focus on that. I'm not going to focus. I've been a consultant for years. The policies and procedures are really important, but I've seen the best policies and procedures not lead to change unless people direct them. So black people in leadership, all those things. I feel impatient. I feel my time's running out, and I'm very focused on developing black people, black businesses. That's my future.
Yesterday, the day before, I was on a Violence Against Women and Girls board for a local authority, and we were openly discussing systemic racism in the police force, and that was a moment in time for me, and I thought, oh yeah, things have changed. Things have really, really changed, and I need to hold on to those moments when I'm having reflective times.
I would say I'm generally a glass half full person, so I remain hopeful and positive. But there are times that you reflect on, like some of the examples I've given, where you question what has changed, and then there are other times that you reflect and you think, actually, we've come a long way. And perhaps it's this sort of roller coaster ride. It's not a linear path that will take us to where we need to be in 50 years' time, right? And I guess it's being comfortable in that sort of uncomfortable space of this roller coaster that we're riding. But I think things overall are changing for the better.
Fantastic way to end, I think. So, as I said at the beginning, these are a series of conversations that I've been hosting and curating here at the Conduit. If there's anything you want to bring to the table that you want to discuss, please contact me and we'll see what we can do. My colleague Rosie at the back helps me with this. I'm really keen to explore all of these conversations around equity, race, and particularly intersectionality and allyship. So we will continue to do this. And thank you, my sisters, for giving up the time. Thanks to you for coming, and I hope you'll come to others in the future. Look forward to